Hello there.
Hello there.
I see that you're tired of having to switch characters, wishing that you could be blasting through content, farming loot, and dropping infusions. All you want to do is play the game, but worry no more. Today, I bring you the class that can do it all. With a single build, we have the perfect healer for every situation. And when you pair it with our last build, the Power Boon Chronomancer, you end up with something truly special. It's time, my friends, for Heal Chronomancer. Welcome back, everyone. I've been playing Heal Chronomancer extensively for the last few months, and it is truly the single most flexible healer that I have ever played. It isn't even a competition. With a single trait change, we can go straight from providing quickness right into providing alacrity. And when you pair this with the last build that we covered, the Power Boon Chronomancer, you can have access to 5 different builds with 2 sets of gear. You can have power DPS, quickness DPS, alacrity DPS, a quickness healer, and an alacrity healer. The way Chronomancer traits work make this the most flexible class in the game. Today's build is easy to play, is incredibly survivable, and you have almost complete freedom in terms of what utility skills you bring, so you can customize your build for every encounter. This lets you take all the wonderful Mesmer skills like Portal, Blink, Time Warp, Feedback, Mass Invisibility, you name it. If you gear this build, this may well be the last healer that you ever need. But that is enough of me gushing, let's dive in. When you become Chronomancer, you get access to Shield as an offhand weapon, which has an amazing block and the absolutely loaded Tides of Time skill. Unlike the Power Boon Chrono in our last guide, Shield is going to be one of your go-to weapons for Heal Chrono. You'll also get access to Wells for some powerful AoE effects. Your shatter skills have also been changed. Mind Rack becomes split second, so now you will shatter your clones twice instead of once. Rewinder will replace Cry of Frustration. You still inflict confusion and damage foes, but now the recharge of this skill is reduced by 3 seconds for each clone that you shatter. This will be one of your most important skills due to the combination of the traits, Illusionary Membrane and Chaotic Persistence, which will grant you and your allies Chaos Aura whenever you use this skill. Time Sync will replace Diversion. You now inflict a shorter daze compared to the original Diversion, but you also now apply Slow to enemies as well for some extra soft CC. You also get access to the new and improved Continuum Split Shatter. Continuum Split is one of the most unique skills in all of Guild Wars 2. You'll activate it, save your current position, health and cooldowns, and while it's active you can use whatever skills you want. It will last longer the more clones that you shatter, and when it runs out, you're reset to your starting position with all of your health and cooldowns intact. You're then free to cast your skills again straight away. It basically lets you travel back in time and use your skills twice.
You've got to come back with me!
There are countless ways to use this skill, but we're basically going to use it to extract as much value from this build as possible. In terms of our gear and food, you hideously overcap on boon duration. The Power Boon Chrono build that we covered last time doesn't require any boon duration, and this build functions very similarly. So your exact choices of gear and total boon duration don't really matter in the cosmic scheme of things. However, more boon duration is generally always a good thing, however. The main decision you need to make in terms of your gearing is figuring out whether you want to tank or not. You can take Harrier's gear if you don't want to tank. This will allow you to max out your boon duration very easily. You can take either Minstrel or Giver's gear if you do want to tank and be as survivable as possible. Minstrels is the more survivable option at the trade-off of having lower boon duration compared to Giver's gear. My personal recommendation and what I do is to run Harrier's weapons and armor and Giver's trinkets. This is going to let you have 100% boon duration when you have regen on yourself, which is very nice. It will also give you 1692 toughness, which is high enough so that it will give you good personal survivability. You do have the option to tank if you prefer, but you're also low enough so that those who have more than 2000 toughness and really want to tank will easily be above you. However, feel free to customize this to suit your needs. If you really don't want to tank, Harrier's gear is the way to go, but I find this to be a good middle ground, and it's also very easy to remember. Just Giver's trinkets, Harriers everything else. Bish bash bosh, you are done. For our runes, we'll take Rune of the Monk, which will allow us to crank our healing as much as possible. Rune of Rebirth is also a very cheap option if you don't have access to the dungeon currency. You can also run Rune of Water instead if you want a bit of extra boon duration, especially good if you're running the minstrel version of the build. Relic of the Monk will allow us to crank our healing as much as possible, but Relic of the Flock is also another nice option due to how often you spam Mantra of Recovery. We'll be taking Sigil of Transference and Paralyzation to increase our healing and CC output. Chronomancer has loads of break bar damage baked in, so it makes sense to double down on this. But you could also run Sigil of Concentration if you're in full Minstrel's gear, which makes up for the boon duration that you're missing compared to Harrier's gear or Giver's gear. For your food, you're going to be taking a bowl of fruit salad with a mint garnish. The extra outgoing healing modifier is exceptionally useful here. For your utility, make sure you take Bountiful Maintenance Oil. This will grant you additional healing based on your healing power and concentration, and this is going to end up being a significant outgoing healing multiplier for you. Do not neglect these. These are one of the most useful items you will have as a healer. For our weapons, non-negotiable are Scepter and Shield. Scepter is going to give you unparalleled clone generation through its auto attack, which is going to generate a lot of sustained healing due to the trait Illusionary Inspiration. And it's also going to fuel your shatters, so you can shatter off cooldown as much as possible. Shield is going to give you access to an amazing block through Shield 4 and great CC and boon output with Shield 5. On Scepter, Ether Bolt will launch tormenting bolts towards your target, and on the third strike, it will summon a clone. Most of the time on Heal Chrono, you're going to be camping on Scepter, just so you can rely on the insane clone generation that this skill outputs. Illusionary Counter will allow you to block attacks, and you can either activate the skill again before you block to generate 1 clone, or after you block an attack, you'll generate 2 clones instead. Another great resource for you if you're tanking, but also in the clone generation department. Confusing Images will fire a beam at your target, which will damage them and inflict confusion. Not hugely important for a heal build, but it is a good source of extra damage if you really want to min-max as much as possible. Echo of Memory will allow you to block attacks and summon a Phantasm at the end of the cast, which will apply slow to enemies and protection to allies. If you block an attack with this, the Phantasm will be summoned instantly, and for a short while, you can use the skill again for an additional block. If you are tanking, this is going to be one of your most critical skills. Tides of Time will fire a wave in whatever direction that you aim, which will stun enemies, block projectiles, and grant boons to allies that it passes through. Once the skill travels a short distance, it will return to you, and if it passes through you again on the return, you'll have a reduced cooldown. This is one of your key sources of might generation as Heal Chronomancer, so make sure you are using this. Staff is my preferred weapon swap. Here you have access to very fast boon generation on Staff 3, which will summon 2 Phantasms, which will trigger the traits Stretch Time and Seize the Moment twice. You have great CC and extra boons through Chaos Storm, and you'll have extra Chaos Aura uptime with Staff 4. This will help you upkeep regeneration on yourself, which will provide you extra concentration due to the trait Chaotic Persistence. Focus is another great option on swap if you need to group up enemies for your team to burst down or provide some extra projectile defense. Your Temporal Curtain will lay down a line of energy which will grant swiftness to allies and cripple enemies. You can then collapse it by activating again, which will group up mobs together, which is the main use for this skill. Your Phantasmal Warden will summon a Phantasm that will throw axes at nearby targets, block projectiles, and if you choose to buff it with specific traits, can even reflect projectiles as well. Sword is another viable option for your alternate weapon. Here you get boon removal just baked into the auto attack chain for free. Illusionary Leap will give you access to some soft CC through Cripple and Immobilize, and Blurred Frenzy is another great tool to avoid damage, especially if you're tanking. You also get to rock the tried and true sword and shield aesthetic, so if you are an enjoyer of that, the option is there for you. In terms of your skills on Chronomancer, you have incredible flexibility in terms of whatever skills you bring. I'll start off by covering what I consider to be the default loadout, and then we'll go into the skills that you can sub in as needed. For our heal, our usual choice will be Mantra of Recovery. You'll first charge this mantra, which will then give you access to 2 healing charges. Once the initial charge is finished channeling, you'll grant both yourself and allies a significant amount of healing. The main reason we take this skill is due to the trait Ego Restoration, which will create a clone whenever we use a heal skill. So whenever we use a mantra charge on our heal mantra, we will generate a clone, which will fuel our shatters and generate a ton of sustained healing. Mantra of Pain is incredible for the might that it generates when you channel the initial cast of it. Once you channel the initial cast, you want to then use your 2 charges as quickly as possible so you can then rechannel the initial charge again. This is going to allow you to ramp up might exceptionally quickly and easily cap out might for your team. It is quite spammy, and personally, I don't run this all the time, so this is one of the skills that you can easily sub out if you need. Well of Action will lay down an AoE that will slow enemies and provide might, fury, and super speed to allies. Another key skill in your might generation, so it's quite uncommon for this skill to leave your bar. Well of Precognition will grant you stability and pulse Aegis to nearby allies, which is an incredibly useful skill if you need to protect yourself and allies from incoming damage. Gravity Well is going to lay down an AoE that will first knock down, float, and then pull foes into the center, which provides a huge amount of Defiance bar damage. It will also deal some strike damage, but that is not hugely relevant for our heal build. An important note about your wells is that due to the trait All's Well That Ends Well, every single well that you use is going to apply healing to your team. So loading up your bar with wells is never a bad idea. In terms of some alternate skills, Well of Eternity offers a huge burst of healing to both yourself and your team, and Condition Cleanse. Mirror will allow you to reflect projectiles, and if you swap in the trait Master of Manipulation, will give you access to another source of Aegis for yourself and your team. Signet of Illusions will generate a clone every few seconds, and when you activate it, it will recharge your shatter skills. This is a very useful skill just to get some extra value out of your shatters, especially if you are generating clones faster than you can shatter them. Portal is incredibly useful to portal your team across large distances, which is incredibly useful for trivializing certain encounters. Blink is an incredible stun break and mobility skill, which if you need to move around an arena quickly is a very good skill to slot. Mimic is a great option as it allows you to charge it, and then whatever utility skill you use next, excluding your elite skills, you will then be able to use again immediately after. This is great when paired with something like Portal, Well of Precognition, or Well of Action to get tons of extra value from them. And if you're not sure of another skill to bring, Mimic is almost always a good shout. Well of Senility will provide you tons of AoE breakbar damage as well as some healing through the trait All's Well That Ends Well. Mantra of Distraction will provide you much better single target breakbar damage, and Signet of Domination is another good option for a huge burst of breakbar damage if you want to really load up on CC and carry breakbars on your own. Time Warp is an incredible option to grant your team quickness and super speed, as well as inflict slow and chilled on nearby allies. I find this to be a really fun one to take if you're running the Alacrity version of the build, so then you can provide permanent Alacrity uptime and not insignificant amounts of quickness uptime as well. This can really help pad out your quickness uptime if your group is struggling as well. So do not neglect this option. Signet of Humility will turn your target into a mower, or on most raid bosses will just provide catastrophic levels of breakbar damage. Mass Invisibility is incredible to provide stealth to your entire squad of 10 people. 6 seconds of stealth is nothing to sneeze at and can allow your team to skip certain areas of mobs entirely. Chronomancer has incredible customization of utility skills available to you, so make sure you have a play around and find what works for you. In terms of our trait lines, we are going to be taking Chaos for the boon generation, Inspiration for the healing, and Chronomancer for the Chronomancer stuff. In Chaos, Illusionary Defense will grant protection to nearby allies whenever you use a shatter skill. The higher your protection uptime, the easier time you're going to have in endgame content. Illusionary Membrane will grant you Chaos Aura whenever you use your shatter skill too, and whenever you have Chaos Aura, your condition damage is increased. The damage increase is not really relevant, but the Chaos Aura is. Chaotic Transference will make it so that when you apply Chaos Aura to yourself, you'll grant it to nearby allies, and when you gain Chaos Aura or grant it to an ally, you'll also apply regen. Regen is incredibly important for you because you get extra concentration and expertise when you have regeneration active. So this trait pairs perfectly with Illusionary Membrane to pump out huge amounts of Chaos Aura to your team, and this makes Staff an exceptional weapon to have on swap. Chaotic Persistence is the trait that will grant you extra concentration and expertise whenever you have regeneration. Roughly, this is an extra 16% boon duration for you, so do not neglect this. Try and keep up regeneration as much as possible, and Bountiful Disillusionment will allow you to grant yourself and your team extra boons whenever you shatter. This will let you generate Might on Split Second, Vigor on Rewinder, Fury on Time Sync, Stability on Distortion, which is incredibly handy, and resistance whenever you use Continuum Split. In Inspiration, Mender's Purity will allow you to remove conditions whenever you use a heal skill, so you have tons of extra Condi Cleanse baked into this build for free. Restorative Mantras will heal allies around you whenever you use a charge of a mantra. This pairs very well with Mantra of Pain and Mantra of Recovery. However, if you're not running these mantras, feel free to sub this trade out as needed. If you're not running any mantras, Medic's Feedback is a great option. You'll cast Feedback whenever you start reviving an ally, and Feedback will revive allies inside its dome. This is going to allow you to pick up your allies much faster and help you stabilize your team. This effectively allows you to fill the position of a budget heal scourge. A very handy trait to have. Inspiring Distortion will grant Aegis to nearby allies whenever you give yourself Distortion or use your Shatter skill 4. So another great source of Aegis to really help your team. Ego Restoration, like we mentioned before, will create a clone whenever you use a heal skill. This pairs exceptionally well with your Mantra of Recovery for some insane clone generation. But if you're running Focus, it may be a good idea to bring Warden's Feedback, which will cause your focus skills to reflect projectiles and reduce the recharge of your focus skills. Illusionary Inspiration will increase the healing you do to other allies, and summoning an illusion will heal all allies around you. This will trigger whenever you summon a clone or a phantasm, so when you pair this with the insane clone generation that you get from Scepter, this is a lot of sustained healing. Restorative Illusions will allow you to heal and cleanse conditions from yourself and nearby allies whenever you use a Shatter skill, so even more value we are extracting from our Shatter skills here. In Chronomancer, All's Well That Ends Well will cause your wells to heal nearby allies when they end, and given that we are usually running wells on this build, this trait is a no-brainer. Flow of Time will grant you Alacrity for every clone that you shatter. Improved Alacrity will cause Alacrity applied to you to be stronger, but have a reduced duration. You also get increased critical strike damage whenever you have Alacrity, but that's not really relevant for today's healing build. This trait just means that you can use your skills far more often than you would otherwise be able to, which as a healer is fantastic. Now on Chronomancer, we'll either be taking Stretch Time if we want to provide Alacrity, or Seize the Moment if we want to provide Quickness. Stretch Time will cause our previous trait, Flow of Time, to affect nearby allies, and we will grant Alacrity to nearby allies whenever we summon a Phantasm. So now we generate Alacrity whenever we shatter, and whenever we summon a phantasm. Seize the Moment works very similar to Flow of Time, where now yourself and nearby allies will gain quickness for each clone you shatter, and you'll also gain additional quickness whenever you summon a phantasm. The fact that these traits are so similar means that the Alacrity and Quickness version of Chronomancer play exactly the same. Just pick whatever trait you need and you're good to go. Now, like most healing builds, we don't have a set rotation. Simply focus on summoning phantasms as often as possible, shattering with 3 clones whenever you're able to make sure that you keep up Quickness or Alacrity. However, there is a nice little opener we can do to ramp up our boons as quickly as possible. Start on Staff and use Staff 3 to summon phantasms, Staff 4 to grant allies Chaos Aura for boons, and Staff 5 for extra boons atop these boons. Then swap to Scepter and start auto attacking. Use Shield 4 if you need to block, or use it off cooldown for boons, your choice. Use Shield 5 off cooldown for extra might, or you can save it for CC if you need. If you have it, spam Mantra of Recovery to generate a clone each time you use it. Keep spamming Mantra of Pain to generate might. Use your Well of Action off cooldown to help keep up might and fury. Use Well of Precognition whenever you need to grant Aegis to your team. If you don't need the Aegis, feel free to use it for healing. Make sure you save Gravity Well for when you need to CC your target. Again, if you don't need the CC, spam it off cooldown for extra damage and healing. You'll notice that I spent the last 5 cumulative minutes telling you to spam things off cooldown. That is the beauty of Heal Chrono. It is just so damn effective that you can basically just spam your skills off cooldown. Save your Aegis, Distortion, blocks and CC for when you need them, and you're good to go. The difficulty in Heal Chrono is tailoring your build to each encounter. There's so much you can do to completely trivialize different encounters, and all you need to do is swap out some traits and utility skills. So take the time and play around. Getting started on Heal Chrono is super easy, but there is so much that goes into mastering it. You've got a fun journey ahead, so buckle up. In terms of using Continuum Split, I tend to just use it whenever I have 3 clones available and some good skills that I want to. However, an ideal usage would be to start with 3 clones, use Shield 5, use Continuum Split in the cast, Well of Action, Well of Precog, Gravity Well or Time Warp, depending on what you have. Shield 4, use your heal skill and use all your shatters, then leave your Continuum Split, and then you can just repeat it from Shield 5 again. That would let you get some peak value from it. When you use Continuum Split will be dependent on what kind of encounter you're in and what kind of skills you want to get more value of, but generally use it with 3 clones, use as many skills as possible, and you're good to go. And that, my friends, is everything you need to know to carry your team atop your shoulders with the wonderful Heal Chronomancer. I'm the king of the world! If you want the perfect build to go alongside this one, make sure you check out my last build guide on the Power Boon Chronomancer. With these 2 builds, you effectively have 5 different roles covered. It is truly obscene levels of value. Chronomancer is the complete package, my friends. But with that, I'll catch you all next time. Cheers.